Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for inviting Robert and I to join you today. Thanks for everybody joining in as well. It's nice to know that in the midst of our last days of summer, people haven't all suffered from webinar fatigue. So especially with this new era of everything being online. So hopefully, Robert, I'll keep this interesting for you, and we'll have some good time for Q&A at the end. Here's our agenda for the day. We'll just give you a little thumbnail on both Landmark and Barrington. We've actually partnered together, but we have different specialties, shall we say. Robert's going to cover off some of the basics of Lean, and most pertinent, how it ties into activity-based planning and how we link those together. We are going to talk about the need or value in using Lean ABP software, specifically a tool called Collaborative Business Planning. And then we'll show you how that was used in a real client case study here in Nova Scotia. I'm based in Halifax, as is Robert, with the Nova Scotia Crown Lending Agency. And then we'll summarize some of the value proposition, and again, hopefully have time for some good Q&A. So for myself, I've been in the consulting training business now for, do the math, 27 years. We have offices in Halifax and in Toronto, and our organization really focuses on process modeling, costing, workload analysis, and organizational performance. We participate with, as subject matter experts, with a group called the Consortium for Advanced Management International. Now, that's a member-driven research organization, mainly in the U.S., but has contingency outside in the U.K., Canada, Australia. Members include Boeing, Hitachi, U.S. Army, U.K. Ministry of Defense, CPA Canada is also a member. And they were actually an organization that developed what they call the closed loop for activity-based planning. So some of the methodology I'm going to take you through today is based on that closed loop methodology. We also partner with CPA Canada and many of the provincial CPA organizations and offer both virtual and in-class. Well, we'll see if we offer in-class in the future on activity-based costing, planning, budgeting. So we've trained probably over, let's say, 1,000 accountants across the country in some of these techniques. We've had the good fortune to apply those to a variety of organizations. And most recently, we partnered with Barrington Ops to kind of bring the best of both worlds together with what we do with ABP and certainly what they do with Lean. So I'm going to pass the ball over to Robert for a little introduction on his part.
Great, thanks, Mike. So, as mentioned earlier, my name is Robert Newcombe. I'm an associate partner with Barrington Consulting Group and Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. So, my background is industrial engineering, so I'm a professional engineer, and the work that I'm doing and our team's doing is really focused on strategy, process improvement, and problem solving. So, I've done a lot of work with Lean and Six Sigma, starting with the traditional Lean. When you think Lean, you're likely thinking of Toyota and car manufacturing. I did a work term at General Motors in Oshawa back in 2012 and have since done a lot of work with a lot of clients in private and public sectors. So whether it's food processing with Eden Valley Poultry or even growing Christmas trees, to that with public sector, provincial and municipal governments mostly. So our practice, Barrington Ops stands for Operational Performance Services, is a practice of Barrington Consulting Group. And we're really focused on the process improvement. So we do Lean Six Sigma training, Lean Six Sigma coaching, and process improvement projects. So Mike, next slide, thank you. So for today, our learning objectives, at a big level, we're looking to understand the linkage between Lean and activity-based planning methodologies. And from the poll earlier, it sounded like a lot of people knew a little bit about both. Most people know a lot about Lean, so we'll try to make that linkage, and Mike will share more about the activity-based planning and really how they work well together for optimizing business processes and then linking Lean to the cost activities of a process. And one of the big values of looking at these two together is collaborative what-if analysis or scenario planning. So For example, if you want to do a lean project or a continuous improvement project, what are the different scenarios of how that might affect your cost? So is it worth the investment to follow through with that type of project? And then we'll look through the modeling software and how lean and activity-based planning go together for collaborative business process opportunities. So I just want to, on this slide, just talk a little bit about how lean fits into an overall performance management system. So if you think of any organization, public, private sector, whatever it might be, services or products, every organization has a purpose, why it exists, kind of the mission of the organization. And then people, you'll see in the top right, execute on that purpose. So you can't achieve the purpose without people, whether it's customers or staff within the organization. And then those staff achieve the purpose through processes, which is what we're going to talk a little bit more about on this session, and problems on the bottom. So you'll see this ties together through operational excellence. And how do you make sure that you have a problem-solving methodology and a problem-solving process? So those wastes that you see in those processes, there's something in place to make sure that you're continuously improving on your business. So what is lean? And people think, well, Lean Six Sigma, what's the difference? And what we want to kind of drive today is lean is kind of that continuous improvement methodology and philosophy, and it's really based on driving the focus from the customer. So how do you improve your processes, improve your service to lower costs, add value, and really eliminate waste? So if anyone asks me what lean is, I try to narrow it down to 4 words: add value, eliminate waste. And the lean framework, it's got methodologies, principles, tools, and techniques, and it's all around improving value for the clients, improving the way we work, and eliminating waste, and looking at processes from end to end. So those that are familiar with lean are probably familiar with value stream mapping and value stream maps. And it looks as soon as something comes into the organization, such as a customer request or order, to when that order is being fulfilled, and all the different steps and activities along the way. On the right, you'll see the costs. Those that are familiar with project management, the triple constraint: cost, time, and scope. What we're looking at today is, instead of scope, thinking about quality and capacity. So the organizational capacity to improve quality. So you want to decrease cost, decrease the amount of time, and then increase quality and capacity. So when I say lean, add value, eliminate waste, well, what is waste? And those that are familiar with lean have probably heard of the acronym TIMWOODS, or maybe you've heard downtime. And these represent the different categories of waste. So I'll just kind of quickly walk through these. I could spend hours just talking through all 8 of these types of waste, but T, transportation, anytime that you're moving items or information back and forth. When we think of waste, waste is when you're not adding value to the product, or you're not adding value to the service. It's any step or activity that the customer is not willing to pay for. So if you have to ship items or products back and forth in your warehouse or your facility, or email documents back and forth, all those handoffs, transportation, that's a waste. Inventory, it might be physical inventory or work in process. It might be information. You just have stacks of paper or stacks of digital information that you just never use. Inventory is a waste when we look at processes. Motion, similar to transportation, but you're looking just within your own workstation. So maybe it's motion on a computer on a screen. You have to look back and forth. You have to go through 10 levels of folders to find what you're looking for. That's all motion, and that's a waste. W would be waiting. So anytime that you're waiting for a piece of information or a piece of a product to come through, that's waste. And that's time that's spent from the customer where they're waiting, and they want their services now and their products as soon as possible. So anytime that you notice you're waiting within a process, that's a symptom and a trigger of waste. Over-processing is doing more work than necessary. So anything like rework, defects that you need to do over, if you need to clarify with someone else, that's all over processing. You should be trying to get it right the first time. Overproduction is doing work before it is needed. So in a typical classic example of a car manufacturing facility, you know, it's that push. So if one workstation isn't ready for the work, but all this work is being piled on, that's overproduction. And we can see that in service environments too, where there's bottlenecks and people just keep pushing them information when they're not ready for it. And that's waste. Defects, that's very obvious and common in products. You know, if a product's defective, you either have to rework it or throw it out. But defects can also be in the case of service organizations. So the mistakes and errors, you know, anytime there's rework involved or clarification, we use a term called percent complete and accurate. So anytime something is incomplete and you need to fill it out and it should have been completed the step before, anytime there's inaccurate information, or anytime there's something that's unclear and you need to clarify, those are all defects. And then the last one is skills. So these are underutilized skills of employees in the organization. So how do we make sure that we best leverage their strengths for the processes? So I'm going to walk through a value stream map here at a very high level and quickly. So when we look at a value stream, there's always a target involved. So for this example, we say we want to provide an inspection report within 20 days of receiving a client request. That's the end-to-end. So with the value stream, we're looking at the high-level activities, not the step-by-step. So basically, we have, in this example, a site visit, an information query, and reporting. And those that are familiar with value stream maps will recognize the sawtooth here, and they add up to the total lead time or the time to serve. So the first is elapsed time or lead time. So we have elapsed time for each activity. So from end to end, which we call elapsed time here. And then there's also processing time, which is the amount of effort required from the staff. So if staff takes 4 hours to complete an activity, there might be a lot of back and forth required or a lot of waiting for information. So even though it's only 4 hours of effort, it might be 10 days of a time span to actually get this done. And so that'd be from the customer's perspective. And then there's wait time in between activities. So from the site visit to information query, for example, there may be waiting or you may be looking for other information. So there might be 2 days waiting. So we can add up the elapsed time within an activity along with the time between activities, which will give us our total lead time. So in this example, it actually takes 21 days from the initial site visit to the end of the reporting, because they're likely juggling other work requirements, other work at the same time. Maybe they're waiting for someone that's on vacation. So it was quite a large time span in this example. And then from these activities in metrics, we can calculate a value-added ratio, which basically means how much effort are you putting in compared to how long it takes to deliver this service or this product. And in this example, it's 6%. So that might seem very low. It is fairly low. And our initiative is, at least for service projects and process improvements, how can we increase that ratio? So you're getting rid of that waste and that waiting in between the actual effort. So whether it's decreasing handoffs or making sure there's no waiting time to bump up that percentage and that ratio.
Okay, I'm going to jump back in. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks.
I'll add a little color to that. This food and drug compliance is actually based on a real-life example from Health Canada, who, I guess, like in the U.S. with FDA, do approvals and compliance inspections and so on. Obviously, at the front line of all the vaccine work that's going on now and the approvals of all of that. So I'm going to continue this story. I'll show a little video here now. And this, I mentioned CAMI before, Consortium for Advanced Management. So this is what we call the closed loop or activity-based planning. So here's the sort of the process flow, the activity flow that Robert described. But leading into that, what drives that is actually our program or our customer or our client demands. So if we could articulate those in terms of outputs, in this case, Health Canada does inspections and they do assessments, and these are some of the activities necessary to complete and deliver on those outputs, or often we'll call those demands. The next step is looking at what are the resources that the organization needs. So in the case of this Health Canada, they have a field team that goes out and does site visits and handles queries. They have some specialized equipment that helps them through the whole process. Some of that is all housed in a building, the people and the equipment, and they outsource the reporting to contractors. So we use some symbology in activity-based planning to capture the different types of modeling elements. So this symbol is a fixed resource, so these are things that don't change over the time period with regard to particularly the cost associated with those resources. And these are variable resources, so you can turn them on and off as needed, as you would with contractors. Rectangles are the activities, and these kind of home plate looking things are what we use for outputs, just again to clarify the different components in that model. How the model actually works, though, is it's driven from the bottom up. So if we look at operational information, such as what are the volumes of inspections and assessments that need to be done, if we know that, and then we know how much activity is required to handle each of these outputs, what we call an activity consumption rate, in this case, how many site visits per inspection, and then how much resource is required to do the activity. So typically these may be available in operational systems. We can gather that information from interviewing with subject matter experts and get directionally correct information about how the business works, and that's really what we're trying to model. So a quick example, if I had 10 inspections and each inspection took me 2 visits per inspection, I'd have to have 20 visits. And if each visit took me 4 hours, I'd need 80 hours of labor to basically handle this part of the business process. Once I do that completely from the bottom up, I can actually compare the requirement against the capacity. Most of our fixed resources will have capacity. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many pieces of equipment. There's only so many square feet in our building. And we can actually then calculate the utilization, make sure how well we're using our resources, but more importantly, understand, do we have the resources from a planning perspective? So that's kind of all the operational information. We can also pull this, we call it closed loop. So the other part of the loop is the top down, where financial information basically gets pulled down, because the dollars in any organization basically sit at the resource level. You pay for your people, you pay for your lease and insurance and facilities, you pay for your equipment, you pay for your contractors. And then we pull those dollars back down through the model, because we've already established relationships from the bottom up. So we can get at the activity costs to do the input queries, the cost to do an assessment. And by grouping like customers together, we can actually get at true customer costs. And of course, if you're in the private sector and there's a revenue component associated with this, or in the public sector with cost recovery, you can actually get at your profitability or percent of cost recovery. So that's kind of how ABP works. And again, we're going to focus really on that activity flow. So going back to what Robert walked us through with the kind of the value stream map, really service performance is dictated by our time to serve, that total lead time. That's kind of from beginning to end. Operational performance and the so-called capacity to serve is dictated by the resources required to deliver those activities. And then the cost to serve is really done by the second pull on or push on the cost down to those activities and ultimately out to the demand. So we go back to the triple constraint that Robert mentioned with time, cost, and capacity / quality. Integrating these concepts together gives you the ability to get at all of those contents. Okay, I'm going to jump in and show you a tool and talk about the role of Lean ABP software. I mean, I would say, and probably no surprise, the most commonly used pieces of software for ADP and VSM would be Excel and Visio. And don't get me wrong, they're great tools, usually for one person though. So if you're looking at kind of expanding the knowledge and getting more people engaged in the process, then you need kind of graphical tools that pull people in and help them understand the business and understand the data and the results that are calculated. So we're using this as an illustration. It's a tool called Collaborative Business Planning, CBP. There are a variety of other ADP, ABC, activity-based costing tools, big ones like Oracle, SAP, small niche plays. There's a variety of Lean tools. Some of you, I know, there's more Lean experts in the audience, so you're probably familiar with some of those specialized Lean. But there's not that many that actually pull these concepts together. So Collaborative Business Planning, it is a Canadian product. It's developed in Ottawa. And it's used both in the private and public sector. And one of the reasons we're going to show you that is we're going to actually talk about a case study with the Nova Scotia Crown Lending that we work with. So I'm going to get out of the presentation, and I'm just going to go to the tool itself. And again, the purpose here is just conceptual. We're not going to get too hot and heavy on the technology. Just want to show the importance of kind of a collaborative approach to understanding and the connection between ADP and Lean. So here we're looking at the ADP model. So we have our site visits, our info queries, our reporting, and we have the two demands, our inspections and our assessments, and then we have our fixed resources, our building, our field team, our equipment, and our contractors. We use the same symbology that I showed you in the slide. I'm going to turn this off for now so I can get the maximum bandwidth. And so we want to start by looking at, this is where we would see the diagram. Again, this is if we were building models. And I'll show you a little illustration. We can actually grab the components and drag those onto the kind of the diagram template to increase the size or make changes. And over on the left, you have a listing of all the things that are actually in your model, so the different activities, the different accounts that you would use, and so on. Remember we say this works from the bottom up. So I just want to talk about that. So we have inspections. So we have 40 inspections. Those inspections are actually then driven up to, in this case, site visits at the rate of 2 visits per inspection, same number that I use in my example with the slide. So our total of 100 visits, 80 of those will come from the 40 inspections, and then we have 20 assessments. They also require some site visits as well. And then we have the time involved in that. So we have 4 hours of both equipment and labor time to complete the site visit. And that brings us up to the field team. And then the field team has a dedicated space of 400 square feet. So that would be probably their office or their work environment for that field team. So those are how the calculations are done. On the diagram itself, you're actually seeing a blend of operational results and financial results. So this model has already been calculated. So if I go in and look at the building, I can actually see here's my cost of my lease and here's the cost of my insurance. And if I go do a quick recalculation on that, I can actually then go down and look at my field team. I can see my salary and my benefits. And interesting, here we have this concept, these little green things with the V's that you'll see here are variables. So we use this concept of a variable to describe the number of people in that field team. So in this case, it's 4 people. So we use that variable in a variety of ways. We use it to multiply by the average salary and average benefits, 5,000 and 1,000, to get the total cost. And we can use it in determination of capacity. So we can actually use it to say there's 160 hours per month that each person has times 4, which actually gives me that 640. So the beauty of that is if I change it, I'm going to make an impact on operational and financial information at the same time. As I move down through the model, if I look at my site visit, I can actually see some summary costs, what the dollars are, and I can actually see then where those dollars come from, because it's keeping track of the linkages and the flow of dollars from the top down. The operational flow is actually from the bottom up. And because it's smart enough to keep the all of the account structure in place as well, you can actually get kind of an expense statement for any of your activities, which show you the contribution from all of your resources, the accounts on your resources to that point in the model. So that's a little bit about how the model works. As I said, we use variables. So some of the variables that we would use that come and are related to Lean would be, Robert described, the processing time. So in this case, we can actually use a variable called the processing time, and that says it's 4 hours, and that number right there, if I hover over the link, the 4 hours per visit is coming because I've got that variable set at 4. And I can also use, Robert described, complete and accurate. So in this case, complete and accurate says it's at 80%. So what that means is 80% of the site visits are done correctly the first time. In other words, 20% have to be redone. So that variable actually gets used to spin up the volume for this thing called site revisit. So there's the 100 visits, 20% need to be redone, so that's 20 visits. And of course, that places demands on the organization to complete those revisits. Now, that would be considered really pure waste. So from a cost point of view, that's about $5,500. What's the impact on resource utilization? Right now, we're at 88%. So we're going to look at that and sort of say, what could we do from a Lean perspective to optimize that? Before we do that, I want to show you the linkage to the value stream map. So in this product, we can also use those activities that have been defined in an activity-based planning model and create a value stream map. Or we can flip it the other way. We could actually be building value stream maps and create activities that we would then link and build in an activity. So you can start on either point and kind of meet in the middle. So here we have the site visits, the query, so some of the wait times, some of the lead times and processing times are complete and accurate. So again, those are driven by variables. So these variables are where data is shared across each of the calculations. If I calculate this model, I can actually get the sawtooth that Robert described, very common in VSMs, and I see my total days, my total processing time, and my value-added ratio, that 6%, which again, not great, but not atypical in organizations. I also can calculate what we call the roll throughput yield, which is really saying over the process, what's the percentage of actually getting it right the first time completely through? So if I had 80% on my site visits, I'm doing my info queries fine. I'm doing those at 100% accuracy, but my reports aren't done correctly. Again, 20% of those need to be redone or re-edited or whatever. So 80% of 80% is 64%. So that's obviously a number that you try to maximize and get as high as possible. So we can actually represent this information. We can go in, because of the same objects, I can get my financial information, I can see my VSM data, I can see my calculated results, and I can also see what resource this activity is related to, in this case, the field team, so I can actually get that information that I saw on the ABP diagram as well. So now I can get more context and more, hopefully, decision-making information into my value stream map. The real value of this, though, Robert talked about scenario planning or scenario playing. So if I wanted to look at this, let's look at the total profit. Again, this would be more cost recovery, public sector. So they're basically losing $10,000 a month on doing this work that's required. So they do have a revenue stream. Each of these assessments or inspections are charging $1,000 for. But it's not enough to cover the cost. What would happen, however, if we had to go to more inspections? So let's say next month we wanted to do 50 inspections. So I'm going to enter this new volume, and I'm going to just simply recalculate my model. Now, the model calculates initially operationally from the bottom up, and in this case, it tells us we've exceeded the capacity. So we do not have enough field team to handle that volume. You'll notice there's no financials. Because they would be erroneous. We have to resolve the operational limitation that this scenario presents. So there's a variety of ways to do that. We could actually, like maybe we just say, oh, let's throw some more people at that. Let's just hire a new person for the field team to handle that extra volume. So remember, this variable is connected to both the average salary and benefits as well as the capacity. So if I increase that, I will increase capacity and increase costs. So I've actually got it working now. I've got 84% utilization, and I can recalculate my costs now, and I see that I'm actually going the wrong way. So I've hired this person, but I'm getting further away from a break-even scenario. So probably not something I might want to consider, and certainly not a lean approach to this. So what might be a lean approach? So in lean and activity-based planning, you would typically go and you would talk to people about the activities they do and what ideas, what opportunities do you foresee. When they talk to the field team, they find out, yeah, these site visits are really problematic because when we show up, yeah, it takes 4 hours, and that's mainly because these people don't know why we're there. They don't have the information we need to kind of tick the boxes and so on, and we waste a lot of time when we're on site. And so we could say, yeah, that's what's causing this 80% complete and accurate. What would be the impact if we could get that to 90%? So let's say even a 10% increase in that. So I can actually go and make this 90%, and I could see and recalculate my model, and I could say, okay, yeah, I'm working. I'm pretty close to the line at 97% utilization, but if I calculate my financials, I can see that I'm going in the right direction. So that might be a target to sort of say, okay, let's improve the first visit kind of correctness and increase that complete and accurate. That doesn't just come because we wish it. We would have to do some work to get there. So talking to the field team again, they may say, well, yeah, maybe we should do some training. We, train the clients on what's happening. So yeah, we could run that as a scenario. So let's create a new activity over here, and we'll call it training. And put it in a better place. And we're going to say, what's the training done? The training is done to support inspection. So we'll make this link. And then it's done by the field team. So we're going to do that. Let me just pretty this up. It's important to have a model that everybody can kind of look at and understand. So here we have the field team doing the training in support of inspections. By default, it puts a value of 1 in. That's probably not. We're not going to do one training session for every inspection. Let's say every 5th inspection, or 0.2, we'll do a training session. And how long are these training sessions going to last? Let's say they're a half day. So let's think that's 4 hours. So now I can sort of see what the impact of adding this training would be onto the workload. And hey, not surprising, we're at 97%. Now we're back to a broken constraint. So we don't have the resources to do the training and to do the site visits to get up to this 90%. However, part of the lean thinking would be, well, not only do we improve the accuracy of being there first time and getting it right, we actually can reduce our time. So if we could reduce, let's say, the hypothesis that we could reduce this in half, so I could actually change my time from 4 hours to 2 hours, and I could recalculate my model, and you can see now my utilization has dropped back into the green here, and I'm actually at 62%. I look at my cost, I still have $5,000 of cost because I've got fixed costs, but if I look at my utilization, think about the number of FTEs I have, I might have an opportunity to redeploy. So if I redeployed that individual somewhere else and say, I only really need 3 to do this work now because of the training, I'm at 83%. And I recalculate, and now I'm actually past the break even. So actually, I'll say making money, but I've done my full cost recovery. So relatively very quickly, you can test out this scenario, take some of the lean initiatives that you might want to consider, run that through, see what the impact is both on operational capacity and utilization as well as cost. And then we can actually bring that over into our VSM, because now this has been updated, so our time and our percent complete and accurate is correct now. And we can also see, hey, there was another benefit as well, because our lead time now, probably not 10 days, because now people know why we're coming and we can do the better scheduling and things like that. So I might even want to change that to be, let's say it was going to be 2 days. So we can become really efficient and reduce some of the waste associated with that lead time. And when I recalculate my model, you can see my value added ratio has gone up to near 8%, and my ROFR yield is now at 72%. So again, back and forth, we can see the impact Lean and ABP. Okay, I think that's pretty much just give you a little flavor for the value of tools and how they can complement your Lean or your ABP implementations. So I'm going to go back to the slide where, and I'm going to walk you through quickly a use case with an organization called Nova Scotia Crown Lending. They are a government agency, a Crown Corporation here in Nova Scotia, basically to provide loans to stimulate agriculture and fisheries here in the province. They have about 26 people. It's a really small organization, but 26 people, and probably about a $2.5 million annual budget. And they basically have around 1,500 clients and loans in place at any one time. Some of the challenges they've had, though, are because they came out of two different loan boards with two different provincial departments. They have different acts, different regulations, different processes, and they've been pushed together now. So they need to better understand their process, and they need to optimize their process. They had a lot of issues with staffing, workload, retention. A lot of organizations do, competitive pressures from the banks, outdated systems that were causing process inefficiencies. So they needed to look at the whole thing. So we did a Lean ABP exercise with them, a Lean Kaizen, to get at the guts of the organization. We expanded that by doing a full workload analysis, and then we use this tool, this Ottawa-based tool, CBP, to build a model to give them operational and financial information and evaluate some of the Lean ideas that they had for process improvement. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of components of that. I'll invite Robert back to talk about how these swim lanes are typically developed.
Great, thanks, Mike. So basically, you'll notice there's kind of a couple elements here. A typical swim lane diagram where you have it based by role on the left. But what you'll notice on the top here is these dotted lines kind of represent activities in the value stream. So you have many different steps happening within one activity. So this is really kind of breaking down the details of each step. So within each sticky note, you'll see some details. So, for example, we want to break this down by step. So we have the effort, which is the processing time. So here it's 15 minutes. The elapsed time or lead time. So that's from the customer's perspective, which is half a day. And then the percent complete and accurate. So 90% of the time it gets through this step without having to go back to verify something or get some incomplete information.
Yeah, and then we can also use this swim lane / value stream information to look at building our ABP model, because really the roles, the swim lanes that define some of the labor resources in the organization. Each of the sticky notes define the activities by role, so we can make that relationship, and then we can take this data, particularly the processing time, because that's our consumption rate, and the percentage complete and accurate, because that drives extra work packages or extra time on activities that need to take place. So this information can then be brought into the ABP model. So I'll just show you a couple screenshots from that. So this is kind of more of an industrial strength model. Again, without getting too carried away here, we'll look at the loan officers for farm. Remember I said there's farm and fish. So in the farm, we have what we call regular time. So they have 3.5 people. This is an annual cost. So they're about $320,000 worth of annual costs. They also are modeling overtime. At the top here, we have the loan manager that oversees the loan officers. And they wanted to capture overtime. You notice overtime has no cost. So these are salaried people, professionals, but they know the workload is beyond what it should be. So they wanted to capture this extra time that people were putting into their jobs, because they knew that was a liability from a management perspective. We were able to draw direct connections, which would represent the supervisory time that the loan manager would spend. And then we have this thing we call an object connector. Basically, it's a mnemonic for this basically summary and where that will be used in the model. The model I showed you before was kind of all on one page. Traditionally, you're going to have multiple page models, so you got to have a little art involved in laying these out and making connections. So basically, the loan officer total time will flow down into the activity structure. So here we have it. So here's the loan manager, and here's the loan officer. And this is the work that they do. They actually do a lot of similar work. Loan officers do most of the heavy lifting, and the loan manager has a lot of sign-off responsibilities for those. So each of these links, we can actually use direct links, or we can bring in links from other parts in the model. And the key thing here is that we're looking now at the fully loaded cost of labor, because what we have all the supervisory responsibilities, right up to the CEO, in fact. We have facilities, we have staff expenses, all of those rolling down. So now we're looking at the total loaded cost of labor, and then where those labor are used, we can actually look at the activity costs or the unit activity costs. So if we look at these ones over here for new farm loans, we can see that they're preparing the loan summary at about $2,000 per loan. It's a pretty expensive activity. And the reason for that is that the farm loan officers actually go to the farm. So they actually counsel the farmer on what the needs might be, and there's travel. Nova Scotia is not a big province, but there are some miles involved in getting from farm to farm, and that time is captured as well as the travel expenses. So that's what makes that a more expensive activity. These activities then all get pulled down into process summaries. And again, we didn't point this out on the swim lane, but we basically have different steps. There's application processing, then there's a review process. If the loan is high enough, it goes to its board review. And then we have some, if it's approved, there'll be some document preparation, and then some legal and registration of that loan. In the application processing for farms, this is where we would bring in that loan summary here. And if we look at the cost, the total cost of doing a loan, this was quite a shock, $5,200. They charge, I think, upwards, I think the maximum they can charge is $2,000. It's based on the percentage of the loan, but the maximum is $2,000 is the fee that they can charge. Most of them are probably around $1,000. So they're actually losing money or subsidizing every loan that they give. And when you compare this against the fisheries loan, so this is on the top here, we can see it's significantly different. And the main reason for that is this application processing, because in the fisheries industry, they do it differently. The application comes in, they're not out on every wharf talking to the fishermen like the farm does, so the costs are significantly lower. And we could actually drill down into that, and we can actually see where those cost differentials. So there's that $150,000 that we saw for only doing 75 loans. So that's what's driving a lot of those costs. So again, just a couple of snippets from that piece of work. Really, their key benefits was finally understanding where the work was coming from and what was driving this overwork, which was causing their retention and recruitment issues. They were able to get this visual map so everybody could agree on the process, understand how well things are being utilized, and then do some comparative analysis between fisheries and farm, and then also identify the big hitters. So out of the lean exercise, typically you're going to get lots of ideas. Which ones would be the most optimal to work on? Some of that may be impacted by your resource requirements and ultimately the cost. So that help you maybe prioritize some of those. And then that's what they were able to do with that, is actually use this model for scenario playing, to the point where they actually did wind up making major changes to the staffing and hiring and reorganization of the staffing to streamline the business process and the resources required. So I'm going to summarize, so we'll leave a little time for Q&A. So Lean and ABP, both powerful tools in their own right. ABP focuses really on developing this consensus and on operational financial flows, building the business and getting a visual of how the business works and identifies where those constraints exist. that can limit your strategic growth and through that give you the ability to do scenario playing to test what the impact would be of changes in clients, changes in demands, changes in the way your business process works, changes in the way you resource things. All of those can be better understood through an ABP model. And on the lean side?
Yep, and basically just Lean is all about adding value and then eliminating that waste, reducing lead times, and taking that kind of perspective from the customer's point of view. But also it's that whole culture of continuous improvement, and Lean activities and Lean projects can help get you to that point. So when you bring these two together, you get the benefits of visualizing the process to resources and outputs, so kind of putting the whole model and package together, evaluating process improvements with the cost and budget elements, and then overall just improving and managing the organizational capacity.
Great, so I'll just leave this slide up. If people are interested, certainly in the deck, we're more than happy to share any of those slides or all of those slides, so feel free to contact either Robert or myself. If you're interested in a deeper dive, we do have some online workshops coming up specifically on how to implement Lean and ABP. And then that's the one in October there. We have some workshops on ABP specifically coming up in the latter part of September. And then Robert's team is running a variety of Lean certification training for both yellow and green belt later in the fall. So again, if you're interested in any of those links actually would be in the handout. So happy to send those links along if you're more interested in that deeper dive. So I'll pause here and I guess throw it back to Michelle or Ruth for any Q&A.